who are watching through live stream as well. And because we are live streaming, when we get to the question and answer session, please do raise your hand and I'll bring you the microphone, and that way the folks at home can hear your question. Another bit of housekeeping before you leave today, please do take a moment to fill out the evaluations that we've left for you. Those help us to plan for future programs. And I am just over the moon to have Natasha Devine here this evening. Natasha is an MFA actor from the University of Arkansas and a published poet who holds a bachelor's degree in speech communication and theater from Jackson State University. She is originally from Chicago, Illinois, and was raised in Mississippi. She believes the purpose of her art is to expose and heal. Her love for language has allowed her to develop poetry and take on the nuances of characters as an actor. She has spent her acting career focusing on classical and non-classical texts. And the discussion this evening will be moderated by my fellow Fayetteville Public Library librarian, Hotspur Klosser. Please join me in welcoming Natasha Devine.
Thank you all so much for showing up.
Thank you for being here, and thank you, Natasha, for being here.
Absolutely.
I am really excited. I've been looking forward to tonight, getting a chance to be the Kyle Kellums for this. Because I got to see you read not too long ago, and I was very impressed. I'm a big poetry lover, and I was just very happy to see someone with as much charisma and as much to say up there doing it. So thank you for being here. And I want to start off, before we start reading, Natasha has said that she's open to, if you have questions throughout the process, you're welcome to raise your hand too. So if you want to ask a question before the end, you can do that if you'd like. But would you tell us about the title?
So, quiet as is kept is a phrase that is used in Black Southern culture. And it's always, it's like a prefix to something that everyone wants to say, but they don't say it out loud, or they don't feel comfortable saying it in front of bigger crowds, and or it is used to reveal one's truth and their secrets. And so for me, when developing this book, I wanted to talk about things that we are uncomfortable talking about in public, and uncomfortable speaking about things from specific angles. And I realized that there are poems in my book that can kind of feel a little like controversial, or a little like, why would you say it like that? But I think it goes with the title, and I think it's the angle that I wanted to take this book, and I wanted to take the people who took the time out to buy it. I wanted to take them on that journey with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I noticed a lot of your poetry does have a very confessional vibe to it. But even, if it's not a confessional poem, it's still, if you're writing about a subject or a topic or a theme, you're still putting a lot of yourself into that.
Absolutely. I think when I write poetry, I think of Frida Kahlo, and she has this statement when she's like, she is the art piece that she knows herself the most, and that is why she displays herself throughout all of her artistry. And I feel that way within my poetry, and I feel in order for me to want someone else to be comfortable telling their story or talking about deep things, then I need to be as vulnerable. Mm-hmm. I need to set that standard so that I am creating a safe space.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of vulnerability in this work. So why don't we get started? If you'd like to start us off with the first poem you've selected to read.
Yes, this piece is called Let His Will Be Done. Mary never fully gave God permission to her body. I was told by nameless women in the Bible that the day he cracked open her purity for his sacrifice, the first rose grew its thorns. After all, when a woman is deflowered in such a way, it makes sense that she grows spikes in order to protect herself. They say her permission was given in a whisper. Leave it to a man to assume he knows what's best for you. Glory be to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but only grace was given to Mary. What a low blow. The short end of a blessing, the robe of misogyny. Of course, God is male. Why else are we made to fall upon our knees in order to please him? There was a reason why the Jezebels in the Bible were shown God's mercy, then later filled with his grace. Before this came heaven and earth. Isn't it just like a man to build something out of nothing, then dispose of it when it no longer serves his needs? And I'm trying to find the difference between God and all of my past lovers. Because lately I've been told to have faith in their existence, although I don't see them much anymore. And I have to wonder, if we're simply being led by the Spirit, if we're healed by the blood, then how careless was it for God to allow that woman to have an issue with hers? Maybe Jesus was trying to tell us something when he sacrificed his. What if Eve ate the apple to rid herself from the garden, but could never quite free herself from man's control? Because there were women raped in the Bible, then later forced to marry their attackers. Women today are still forced in covenants with their attackers. You see, I think maybe we've been getting it all wrong. What if masculinity isn't toxic, but rather biblical? It's like the word was too busy abusing the mother, so for his forgiveness, God decided to bless the child who managed to have their own. In this, Jesus wept, but no one else did. And I have to forgive myself on drunken nights when I didn't quite say no, forgive him for not quite hearing yes, remind myself that woman will always be servant, and favor is man. Savior. In this moment, just like Mary, I found favor, right?
So that's a powerful poem. There's a lot going on in there. I read this one a couple of times, and each time I read it, I came away with a different meaning. At first, I thought it was just on the surface level, I thought it was a poem about just the relationship between the sexes. But then rereading it, you find the consent, faith, forgiveness, being human. And I was just wondering, so what does the poem mean to you?
So I will say I believe in God. So okay, I am Southern Baptist. I have a great relationship with God, but the older I get when I read the Bible, from my standpoint, it contradicts itself, and it should. Because everybody has a Bible. So there is a Natasha chapter, there is going to be a Hotspur chapter, there's a Lacey chapter, everybody has their own Bible. And so I believe that God approaches the individual specifically. So when I take religion off the story of Mary and I just read it as a story, I was like, I don't really like how she was treated. I was like, my girl went through a lot. And I know that's like rough to say out loud because it's like, no, it's Mary, it's Jesus, it's Christmas. And I love Christmas, I do. But for me, this poem is looking at Mary as a young girl and what that burden must have been like. Just as a woman going through all of these things in this journey that she didn't quite ask for, and also the consent was gray. So if you read, I want to say it's the King James Version, when Gabriel comes to Mary. So God doesn't go to Mary himself. He sends his homeboy. He's like, Gabe, go tell her. So Gabe walks up to Mary. He's like, hey, you about to have Jesus, the Immaculate Birth. And she's like, oh, that's wild. I'm married. And essentially, there is a line that always stuck with me when he says, it is the word of the Lord, and the word of the Lord is so. That is not giving me room. And this is like red crossed on your door before I get your firstborn, God. This is like that God, like wrath God. And so it's like, did she really have room to think about that decision in her position? And I feel that she didn't. And I also feel like a lot of women today don't have room to properly make a decision because of all of the circumstances that surround it. So that's what this poem means to me.
Wow. And, I did have one question about a term. You said, what if masculinity isn't toxic but rather biblical? And I've heard the phrase biblical masculinity before, but I always heard it as Jesus masculinity, which is, being humble and soft-spoken and, lead through deeds, not, words, kind of a thing. But so this got me thinking again about that. So now I guess I'm going to have to reread the Bible too on top of that. So I'll pencil that in for this weekend. But yeah, I was wondering if you had taken that in consideration when you wrote that line.
No, I wrote that line from the standpoint of how, biblically speaking, masculinity ruled. And even the line of, like, women were forced to marry their attackers, biblically speaking, that was their punishment. If I desired you as a man and you said no, I just have to attack you in that way. And as my punishment, I have to marry you and take care of you, and then I get you for the rest of my life. So that angle, and granted, once I started this particular poem, my mama was like, "Girl, don't write that." That was before her memory left. She was not pleased. And so many people aren't, because it's like, oh, it's not necessarily questioning the Bible, but I love looking at things from an angle that I don't think we sit and do on a daily basis.
Yeah. Let's see. I think the next one you're going to read is also about, speaking on the subject of being taboo. And provocative. Would you like to read the second poem?
I would love to. This piece is called Pro-Choice. If someone asked me, I would tell them that I am pro-choice, that I loved my child enough not to let them embark on this tainted world. I will tell them that it hurt the day man-made machines sucked the life out of me, only to violently confess my sins down the drain. I would tell them a story of joy, how for a brief moment I was able to protect you from the lies and bloodstained promises gift-wrapped by the devil. I would tell them of your innocence, how you glowed like choir angels led by Lucifer. What type of mother would I be if I let you take that fall? Polluted upbringings contaminated by earthly destruction, this world never deserved you. But your death does not go unnoticed. The absence of your presence feels like broken virginities through gang rapes. I could not save my child, but I will find comfort in knowing that I somehow managed to save its soul.
So that one's a difficult subject.
Very.
Yeah, and how difficult is that for you to write?
It is. That poem was really difficult to write. And I want to say, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I'm a black woman. It's wild. And a lot of that, when I wrote the piece and I look at what happens in the world to black children, specifically black boys, and it was during the time of a lot of protesting, there was a fear of pregnancy. There was a fear of birthing in this cycle, and can my heart take what I am watching so many mothers go through all across the news? And so, while I've always been pro-choice because I think a woman should have that choice, it became a deeper thing for me when I thought, we don't know a person's why. And it's so selfish to assume that. And that is just my standpoint on that.
All right. And I was going to say that what I found interesting about this poem was that it takes such a different approach, the voice in this poem. That's not in a rationale that I ever would have considered or that I'd ever heard before. But one thing I really do like about it is this is an issue that, it's very divisive, very hot button issue, especially in this country, and that most people look at it as black and white with little to no gray. And I feel like this is a gray poem.
Very gray.
Gray poem.
Very gray.
And I enjoyed seeing that. So let's see. you want to move on to the next one?
Sure. Is there any questions from our audience before we move on to the next one?
I'm just glad that you're here, that nobody took your life.
Thank you.
Know what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I understand that as well. Yes, ma'am.
You remarked about your mother saying, "Ooh, don't write that." Did your mother get to read your book, and did your book pass through like people that you said, "Can you read this and tell me what you thought," or was it a very individual journey?
The book it was both, but my mother's memory declined before I got to the phase of, here is a book, here are completed pieces. So she has the book, but she's never been able to read it. Mississippi. Yes, ma'am.
So this is a little bit of a throwback to the last poem, but it really struck me when you described masculinity as biblical, and because Christianity and spirituality is so interwoven, as well as patriarchy into our society, do you foresee that level of biblical masculinity morphing into something different?
One can hope.
Right?
One can hope that, and we do see it. That was a shady comment. We do see it. Like, things have absolutely, changed and have grown, but we still have so much growth to do. I do believe that.
Okay. I want to move on to, this is my favorite title in the book.
Yes. I didn't know which one we was talking about, but that is funny. So I'll do a little back before I get into this poem. I went to an HBCU, and if you know what that is a historically black college and university. And the University of Arkansas, when I got my MFA, was my first time at a PWI. A PWI is known as a predominantly white institution. And I remember being on campus, and I was like, I don't feel safe. I feel a little scared, okay? I feel a little nervous. And I think I wrote this poem my first week of grad school when I was here. Dear white college frat boy. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay. Dear white college frat boy, you are no big man in hoodie, but I fear you. When walking past you, I cling on to my roots like handbags in shopping malls. I clear the way for your supremacy. All hail to monsters who wear Ralph Lauren, lacrosse, and privilege. Walk in your father's shadow, silver spoon. Daddy freezes bank accounts. Elsa takes the blow. They will tell you that no woman was objectified during your house parties, that mommy wanted to be quiet during dinner tables and discussion. Call it fiction. Blame not yourself. The girl hair shouldn't have been so long if she had no means for you to climb it. Didn't society teach you that not all little girls want to be kissed by a freaking frog? Pocahontas, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. I am a female victim, and you are now watching Disney. Pay for her silence, like father, like son. Incredible. In some cases, it takes over 14 years, but there will always be a sequel to lessons unlearned. Attack her motives. Alone in the room with 7 men, who can blame the boy? The shape-shift of sacrifice. One kiss, no longer a princess, she now stands as a frog. Your aura brings no protection. In fear, I disguise myself as a man. Go to war with your views, bring dishonor upon my family's name. You turn bearer, claw away at my bravery when you enter the room. I seek through chairs, dissolve into floors. Never mind my presence. Step where you please. You stuff children into convenient boxes and overstuff ballot boxes, and America turns blind. Sing your ballads. Oh, say, how can they not see? Today you bumped my shoulder. I understood your mother more as I sat quietly and dared not to make a peep. Yesterday your father crumbled the world with his bare fist. They all sat quietly, held your mother's hand out of reflex, and dared not to make a peep.
So is this poem addressed to a specific person, or is it more of an open letter to a group of people?
It is more of an open letter. It's not addressed to a specific person. It's more of an open letter when watching the dynamic of power on a college campus, and then understanding that that power transitions into the real world in our everyday life. And there is a bit of fear in watching people at that young of an age get away with anything, knowing that when they step into society, that is going to be what they're used to, and that's what is going to cater to their being. So it's just an overall letter.
Nice. And I noticed that I like the style of this poem, and I was curious if you had a specific form that you're using for that. Like the way you highlight certain words in bold, if there was a reason behind that, or if you just felt compelled to do that.
I just felt compelled to do that. And when I wrote this piece, there's a lot of, I don't know if you caught it, but there's a lot of Disney references in it. And I looked at the words that are emboldened, I thought of them as titles of moments.
Yes. No, I got the Disney thing, but now I see the titles. Cool. Very cool. So we have, I think the next, you're going to read two poems together. Hometown Glory and City Blues, if you're up for that.
Hometown Glory. I left and no one noticed. When I returned, no one welcomed me home. City Blues. My city birthed Oprah, then chased her out of precaution. Couldn't stand anything that big and that black is hard enough to keep Negro women in check as it is. The city has streets filled with potholes, mothers who instill the luxury of welfare onto their young like survival skills. My home is made up of southern biscuits and cotton fields. The climate is always hot. The cops are as crooked as the letters. The humps in our bags are from unpaid labor. We're still chasing that 40 acres and a mule. But it's home. It's the smell of magnolia trees, dirt roads, Friday night football games. Home where we all can't wait to leave, but somehow all seem to stay.
I think those two might be my favorite poems in here. I can't help but think of the obvious English lit major, Thomas Wolfe, You Can't Go Home Again. And this hit me particularly hard because my brother went on a sabbatical to our childhood home in Georgia as part of his writing his memoir, and found out that our childhood home is now a Popeye's chicken. Oh. And I was like, so that kind of hurt. But I think I was feeling the feels when I read these poems. But what I want to know is where is home to you, and why did you return, and why weren't you welcome?
So the first piece is not a location. It is more of a mental space. I think that sometimes we as human, we leave our bodies and we go through these phases of depression and sadness, and we're not ourselves for months and years or days, and nobody around you like notices or says anything or check on you. And so you do the work, all of the work, and you work on yourself. You take those long bubble baths, and you get your therapist, and you read all the self-help books, and you start eating better food, and you're back to yourself. But no one says, I'm so proud of you, because they didn't even notice that you weren't yourself. And so I was in that space when I wrote Hometown Glory. It was a space of coming out of a dark moment in my life, and I wanted so badly for someone to be proud of me, but I realized no one honestly knew that I did all of that in silence. And so that is what Hometown Glory represents. City Blues is more about Mississippi, and there's so much, my home is so beautiful, but there is so much poverty, and it's so hard to make the decision and say, as much as I love this place, as much as I love all of the people, this isn't enough for me personally. And if you say that out loud, it's kind of hard to come back. And it's not looking down on those who decided to stay. I mean, you wouldn't have small towns if everyone left. So you appreciate those beings, those mom and pop shops. But you also have to be honest with yourself and say, I want more. And so I have to leave. And I had a beautiful moment this past year where I went home for my high school homecoming, and I was very nervous. I was like, oh my God, no one's going to speak to me. Or they're going to walk past me and just kind of give me the look. But when I walked in my high school, everyone hugged me and told me how proud they were. And it was such a beautiful moment of letting me know someone may not get your original steps. They may not get it. They may not agree with it. But if you keep to what is true to you, eventually they will see it.
Wow, very nice. And that actually makes me think. A lot of your poems. I think in your introduction you mentioned that these are four. The premise of my art is to expose and heal.
Yes.
So one cannot heal if you don't see the parts that are broken. So the exposure, while brutal, is a necessary madness. But so speaking of self-help, is this book meant to help people?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. I think that all of my art, no matter what I create, it is in the hopes of healing. I hope to be so vulnerable that it's contagious. I hope to tell my truth so that you're like, oh my God, that happened to me and I've never actually said that. Or I want to get up and I kind of want to tell my story too, and I want to foster those spaces. And for me, the best way I've been able to do that is through being just honest in my own art.
That's awesome. And I do want to say my favorite line in here. You've got a lot of really good similes in this volume, but the cops are often as crooked as the letters. I like that a whole lot. Okay, so I think, this next one, before you read it, I do want to ask a question about it.
Yes.
So the next poem, called A Stigma, you have a trigger warning.
Yes, I do.
At the top. Trigger warning for depression.
Yes.
And I was wondering, is that something you do? Is that something you've always done for your work, or?
It is something that I specifically did with this book. I want to be able to expose and write on any topics that I choose, but I also understand that some people may not be ready to read that, and I don't know what a person is going through in their personal lives. So for me, and I definitely adopted this from my theater culture, my theater background, having those trigger warnings at the top of my poems on my pages, you can see that and say, I can't take that today. I don't really want to read that. And you can move on to the next poem if that's just not something that you're ready to take in.
Right. But do you ever wonder, though, if there's a poem that you think needs a trigger warning, but also you think that everybody needs to read it?
Yes, and I also, it's hard, right? Because then I'll just put trigger warning to the top. The book is a trigger warning. Yeah, so that's hard. But anything that's like a really heavy theme throughout a piece that I know can get a little touchy, I try my best to protect my audience and the people who are supporting me, because that's very, very important to me. It's like their protection. Am I protecting their hearts when they pick this book up? Am I protecting their hearts when I'm performing at different shows and things like that? So I think the trigger warnings are definitely necessary.
I appreciate that, and I know your readers appreciate it too. Would you like to read Stigma?
Yes. When a black man is depressed, he will bury his agony between the thighs of a woman. Label her bitch, slut, his mother, all the things that he despises. His friends will look to him as a hero. His body count rises like water. Call him Harvey, destruction, forgiveness, anything but man. Familiarize himself with the dark side of the moon, transforms the night. Revenge falls upon extension. Deception cons the bay into believing that nothing of earth exists. Be alien, foreign, opposite and exactly like his father. Masculinity floats, sinks, then drowns, unaware how to swim to shore, unaware how to swim to solution. Roll up his problems in hopes to blaze away the truth. The community welcomes this behavior. Boys will just be boys, and black men will only be statistics, prison numbers, emotionally and physically unavailable. No one will notice that his demons are shadows, difficult to point out assassins in the dark. The truth is, he won't understand his rage, just that he feels it all the time. The sadness, the isolation, the inability to identify the body lying next to him. So he drinks, because seeking help makes you weak. It makes you less of a man. He substitutes answers for grandmother's prayers. The light inside of him ignites. It metamorphs into flames, engulfs the body. He now moves through life as ashes and bones, a phantom spirit of his former self. But you call him father, husband, and even your son, don't you?
So this was the poem I think that made me realize when I went back and reread several other poems. Most of this book is about the black female experience.
Yes.
But then there are a number of poems that are addressing directly the black male experience. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering how you found that process.
I think because we affect one another. And if we are allowing the black male to behave in this way, and we're encouraging these things that can be harmful and negative, it trickles to the black woman and vice versa. And for me, I think, first of all, I think black people are beautiful. And I love black men, and I understand that there is so much that needs to heal, but we don't have that conversation. And when we do have the conversation, it's braggadocious. It's, oh, he got 7 girls, hey, versus, oh my God, you need a hug. Because the hug is the truth, right? Mm-hmm. It's the needing intimacy, and I can't find it in one person, so I'm searching for all of these people, and the root is my childhood abandonment. But we're not having the proper conversation, so I can't get to and find the root of that. And so when I speak to, and I'm not a man, so I could just be wrong, but when I speak to the Black male experience, I am speaking to things in the Black man that I want to heal. So it's never a bashing conversation. Right. It is always a space of, I see this thing, and I would love to have this conversation with you, or love to figure out, how do we get them from childhood? How do we do that? Because we're treating our fathers, our husbands, our sons all the same way, and we're excusing the behavior in all of these generations versus having the conversation that could be healthy and break those generational curses.
Okay. That's what I thought you were doing the whole time.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Do you have any audience questions?
Oh, yeah, any questions? Okay. I think you're going to read another pair of poems here, starting with SBIW, and then A Generation's Love Letter.
Yes. I no longer desire to be a strong Black independent woman. It is much too heavy of a burden to bear. I saw how it destroyed my Nana and almost killed all of her daughters. Maybe I'm a bit too passive, but death by suicide has never been that attractive to me. A Generation's Love Letter. We've been told stories of your greatness. How you marched on enemy battlefields with Emily Dickinson, signed by ballpoint pens with literary bravery seeping out of your pores, they say. That you slayed dragons bigger than Mark Twain, breathed fire down the throat of Maya Angelou, gave her permission to speak, strategically placed stanzas at the feet of Nikki Giovanni, but somewhere along the way you forgot your words. Got lost like John Keats, became a Rolling Stone, left your only child in the hands of teenage mothers, never quite experienced enough to bring them up properly. So my generation, we were never raised. We just kind of grew up. Don't bite the hand that feeds you, but your palm was often empty. You left us here to starve. Didn't take time to teach us how to fish. See, they will leave you out in the cold, then become upset when you learn how to warm yourself. I will not apologize for learning how to survive. We are but mere students, a product of our teachers. So how dare you look at this chaotic perfection in the face and say that it is not good enough when we have always been good enough? Question. Were you too ashamed to visit the orphanage that you once built? They say you slow dance in blizzard storms with Robert Frost, kissed the cheeks of Margaret Walker, ran fearlessly towards theory with Lawrence Dunbar. Did you trip over words? Take flights on Malaysian Airlines because we never got your postcards or your black box messages to show that you even care? But we are told to look up to you, to value your absent presence. But did you for 1 second stop to think that one day we would come to the realization that a diamond really has no value? It's just a colorless stone. How disingenuous of you to point the index finger of blame. My generation, we are not angry. We're simply misunderstood. They say that a child without touch turns cold. You must forgive us.
What did your grandmother mean to you?
Depends on which one you're talking about.
Well, the one in the first poem.
So my grandmother, she had 9 babies, and she was this beautiful woman, and she wore her hair in this like maroon color. and I look exactly like her. Like, we are clones. My family calls me, like my cousins and my aunts and my uncles, they call me Granny because I am her twin, up and down. We are the same. Face structure, smile, everything. And I just remember watching her grow up, when I was growing up, watching her, and this is like back in 90s, and she had 9 children. She was a single mother, and she worked her butt off to like give them the best that she could. And I watched my aunts and uncles battle things like depression, addiction. I am a product. I was born addicted to crack, so I'm a product of that. But she never bent, my grandmother. She never bent. Like, the entire time, and going through everything and taking care of her children and stepping back into her children's lives when they're adults and making a mistake, and then catering to her grandchildren. There was never a moment of bending, and I used to admire that. When I was younger, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna be just like her. I'm gonna be so strong. And now I'm like, that is so sad. That woman needed a break. She needed a vacation. Like, she needed some time for softness, and she was never allowed that. And I think that phrase, strong Black independent woman, it is a generational thing that is passed down. Like, we hear it from our mothers. Our mothers were that, and then our grandmothers told them to be that. And it's a survival skill. And I think that what happened in the midst of trying to survive, being like one generation moved from sharecroppers, the crack era of the 90s and the 80s, I think we took independency, which is a tool, right? Everybody should be independent. There's not a single soul that lives on this earth that should not be independent. Everybody should be independent. But independency is a tool. It's not a way of life. And because, for the most part, the Black woman is without aid, we have had to take a tool and made it a way of life. And I don't want to do that. I'm tired.
I don't blame you.
No, I'm not doing that.
Man. And for a generation's love letter, there's so many, this is like an A-list literary name drop. When I was reading this, I got a kick out of that. But what spurred that poem?
That's funny you asked. That is probably the pettiest poem I've ever written. It was not a beautiful generation letter. It was not meant to be this thing that people... What happened was I was in this group in my undergrad, and this group is called Outspoken. Shout outs to them, they're amazing. But it's a group of poets, singers, and musicians. And every group on a college campus has to have an advisor. And we had an advisor. And this guy, I won't name drop because I love him now, and he loves my book. But this guy is like a literary rock star. I mean, he wrote some of the most famous musicians' biographies. He had his own magazine. And he kind of like signed off on the organization existing, but never came around. So he like, yeah, y'all can be a thing. But he never showed up. He never came around. And out of nowhere, he comes to the meeting and he like threatens to quit. And we're like, you don't even work. So why would you, why are you quitting? You don't even work. You don't even. So when he did that, he was like, I'm going to take some time and think about it because I just feel like the work within this group is not up to publishing standard, was always his thing he'd say. And so when he said that, I sat and I wrote this attacking him. Yeah, that's why it's very petty. There's no meaning behind any of this.
Just full on petty. I love it.
This is all like attacks to one person from like the group. It was like, this is how we feel. So he like shows up at the next meeting where we critique poems. And I get up and I read this poem, and all of the members of the organization, I'm the president at this time. So they're like in my corner, they know what it's about. They're like, yeah, she's gonna serve it to him. He critiqued that poem so bad. Y'all, so many comments. This is actually like the third draft because the first draft, even as I was attacking him, wasn't good enough to attack him. So, yeah, that's a very petty poem. It means nothing. I mean, it means something.
Right.
But like, if you want to "We Are the Worlded," that's not what I was going for.
No, that's awesome. I love that.
Do you know if he ever perceived that this was about him?
I hope not. We have such a lovely relationship now, and I was younger and I was hot-headed, so let's hope not.
Oh my gosh. Okay, and I think you want to read the next two in tandem as well. I think we have Facebook status. And one of these things is not like the other.
Yeah. We're here. Okay. I will say I am so embarrassed of I'll just read them. Just here we go. We'll talk after. Facebook status. April 6, 2012, 10:33 p.m. People keep asking me why I date white men. Well, to answer your question, I date black men too, but I am more attracted to white men. They have all the equipment and twice the cash. Wait a minute. No, I'm almost done. I'm almost done. This is the disgusting part. They have all of the equipment and twice the cash. What can I say? I like what I like. White is right. Years pass. Lessons learned. Love, knowledge, and appreciation for my people grow. Self-shame evolves into acceptance. Acceptance pour out into love. The girl above was hurting with wounds invisible to the eye. Forgive me, Black Kings. I didn't find the value in you because I was never taught to find the value in me. My apologies, my truth. One of these things is not like the other. I tried to assimilate, stretched my voice into high-pitched carbon copies of likes and totallys, tried to silence the Negro in my smile. But the Afro in my dialect always seemed to show up at keg parties uninvited to. Thought if I put just a bit of relaxer over my vocal fry, I could blend in with the white girls. Turn off all the lights and my Marco would match their polo perfectly. I convinced myself that in this, I wasn't drowning. Tried to date outside of my blackness. But the white boys would gift wrap me in lab coats, parade me around as an experience. I used this method to get back at the black boys who only saw their mother in me. Black boys who thought that loving a dark-skinned girl that they deemed pretty was an exception. I hung between experience and exception, leaving empty shells of my skeleton in the drive-thru. Told myself that this was right. So I pulled up to the window, ordered multiple combos of whiteness that would fit inside of my lunchbox. No matter how uncomfortable or unseasoned, I was determined to be an American in a way that screamed success, that detached you from your mother, that echoed, "You made it out of the slums." Thought if I wore their clothes enough, they would ignore my black ankles, peeking just above my tattered blue gym socks. But the work, it got too dirty. Eventually, I had to roll up my sleeves. The more of me they would see, the less they would embrace. In my solitude, I had to learn suffering and solace. It wasn't my reflection that I hated, just the handheld mirror society dug out of the gutter to say that brokenness is all a black girl could ever be. After my exile into the abyss, I went walking along the shores, caught a glimpse of my image floating next to Typhoon's memory. I smiled up at Oshun, the goddess of the sky, felt my ancestors swoop in, their arms wrapped around me for protection. I heard their voice crack like lashes on the backs of unfreed slaves as they whispered, "My child, you have always been enough in your black skin, in your African-rooted body." So I took a step into the water, was baptized in blackness, no hand behind my neck to hold me upright, but I floated anyway. The world made no sense, but I finally belonged.
That poem has some of my favorite lines in the book. There's so much fun wordplay in here, and I like tried to silence the Negro, my smile. My Marco would match their polo perfectly. Baptized in blackness. This is a fun poem to read. But again, it's a deeply personal poem. And between both of those poems, identity is such a prevalent theme in your work. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find, a handful of poems in here that aren't somehow related to identity. But why is that important to you?
As I stated before, I grew up in Mississippi in a very, very small town. Actually, it is the town that Oprah Winfrey is from. It's called Kosciuszko. Very small. And when I looked around at my youth without understanding, without reading the books, without knowing the structure of life and generations and all of these things, just as a teenager growing up, when I saw my people, it was doing things that I didn't want to do. Like, I didn't want to work at a Nissan plant, and I didn't want to work at a poultry plant. I didn't want to, I think the highest level of careers that I saw was like black educators, teachers. And I so desperately wanted to detach and be so different from my mother. And my surroundings didn't foster positivity in black images, which is why I am so blessed and so extremely grateful that I went to Jackson, the best HBCU in the world, Jackson State University. Won't he do it? Because my perspective about who I am and what my people can and have accomplished, my world was opened up, my mind was opened up, and a lot of my activism is my apology for what I grew up thinking and what I thought was a method of survival was to adopt the other culture. It was a compliment for people to say, "Oh, she's black, but she's different. She's not like, no, she can come. She's that being that exception." And now that I think about it, I feel so bad for younger me. Like that girl, poor baby, you know, and just so blessed for growth and education and understanding. And so the Facebook status popped on my news feed, because Facebook will remind you of your traumas. And when it did, I was like, Lord, they gonna find this and drag me. The moment I hit a Broadway stage, it's gonna be all everywhere. And I was like, or I can say I said that, admit my truth, understand where I was in that space, understand my growth. And so that poem I wanted to share. And then one of these things came because I was like, I also want people to understand where my mentality was at that time. Mm-hmm. Not giving excuses, but definitely wanting to show where the point of growth had to come from. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you were born in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And you were raised in Oprah Winfrey's.
Yes, we moved to Mississippi. I was 10 years old.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I was saying, because Oprah did the reverse.
Yeah, that's why we cousins. No, for real, we cousins in my mind.
That's awesome. That is so cool.
Because she literally moved, no, for real. She moved to the south side of Chicago. I was born south side of Chicago.
That's awesome.
We did that.
Just two ships passing in the night.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
My cousin.
Let's see. I think we're going to do, got a couple more poems left. This is another trigger warning poem for Black trauma.
Yes.
And whenever you're ready, you can go.
I am an activist, and so I am involved heavily with the community here and wanting to help voices and people who are silenced. I'm giving the prefix of where this was birthed. And I remember I showed up at a protest. I can't remember what it was for because I've been to a gazillion. And I was just there as someone in the crowd, and the speaker walked up and was like, "Hey, Tasha, can you get on the mic and do a poem? We lost somebody that was going to say anything. Can you come say something?" And I was like, "Okay, I got one. That should do." And I got on stage and I said the poem. And that stuck with me on my drive home, being able to keep recycling the same words without seeing effective change. And so this poem was birthed from that. When an old social justice poem will do. The topic will be on racism. You will repeat these words the same as you did during the last protest. It will prove that time has moved forward, but the issues stood still, with their hands up, a bullet in their backs, a knee on their throat, when an old social justice poem will do. You will pull it out from the back of your trauma, tucked deep within your memory, fail to question why 10 years later the stanzas still make sense, why the metaphors feel relevant. These words should no longer matter, but they do. Now more than ever, when an old social justice poem will do. You will find it drowning in the waters, wade in the waters. It will trouble the waters like ghosts haunting the Middle Passage. It will be a bloody Sunday in 1972, the Black Holocaust in Arkansas, known and unknown news. They will cover the days of worship, but only if you include the bombs, the Negro bodies, the charred bones of 4 dead Black girls erasing the 5th, because no one likes to talk about the living dead. What an old social justice poem will do, it will fall on deaf ears like the cries of weary travelers making their way through the Underground Railroad. You will find it swinging low from magnolia trees, like sweet chariots galloping their way into the depths of Mississippi, carrying the savory souls of freedom riders, seasoned by a Jim Crow South. Them boys be finger licking good with the trigger, but even better with a noose when an old social justice poem will do. The crowd will rumble, ferocious like the belly of a tropic thunderstorm. It is the brick in an adolescent's hand tearing through community glass-stained windows. It will be the tear gas that clogs your lungs, the police club hitting your backs, the disperse of defeated fighters stepping over the body of the slain. It is the silence. It is the sirens. The contentment until it's no longer enough. But when a poet puts down her words, she will birth these metaphors and bring them to the fight instead.
How difficult was it to write that poem? That's what I want to know.
That poem wasn't difficult because, honestly, there are endless events to talk about. So it was simply a research piece of looking up events that we know about and events that we don't know about and talk about. This happened throughout time that have caused for the same reaction that me and my body is giving today. Like, this isn't the first time we've seen protests. This isn't the first time we've seen issues like this. So once I started, it wasn't a difficult process. It was just like, I got to stop this poem at some point because I could have, I could have kept going. Fortunately, I could have kept going. And I was like, well, no, you need to wrap it up. Yeah, that was the process of that piece.
Okay, because I mean, I had a hard time reading it as a white person. I just want to say, so I can't even imagine writing it as a black person. I mean, good grief. Why is it that these things aren't changing? Why?
Beats me. I done my part.
And I did like, I think my favorite line in here was, she will birth these metaphors and bring them to the fight instead. How powerful are words in this fight, do you think? And, how essential is art? Can this war be fought with metaphors?
Oh my God. Art and words are so powerful that it's the first thing they censor. When you think of any movement throughout time, the first people that are attacked or silenced or kind of erased are artists. They are the storytellers, the dancers, the creators. Because what art does is you don't have to have my lived experience to sit and listen to my poetry and kind of get an understanding of who I am as a person. Now you have an understanding. From that understanding, you can birth the ability to relate and sympathize. From the ability to relate and sympathize, maybe I want to learn just a little bit more about what you just said. So now I'm going to pick up a book, and I'm going to read that book, which is why they ban books. Art has the ability to say everything, and people in power know that. So we strip that ability. We censor art. We don't fund the artists who are in the streets and who are putting up art that can be seen as political or controversial, which is why with this book, I published this myself. I didn't want a company coming in telling me what to take out, what not to say, what not to use. I funded the publishing of this book because I know how important art is.
I love that. It's awesome. Speaking of art,
The next one.
yeah,
Two more.
we've got two more poems.
Do we have any questions before we move forward?
Could you tell us about the Black Holocaust in Arkansas?
Oh my God, yes, absolutely.
Earmuffs.
The name of this town is escaping me. Simone, if you know it, jump in and scream. There you go.
the damage done at that time is still being affected within that community in 2023.
And there are books written about it. And if you research those books now, 2 of them don't exist. You cannot find them anywhere. And so many black men were murdered. But we have people who were born in Arkansas, live in Arkansas, raised in Arkansas, don't know about it. And they deemed it and called it the Black Holocaust. But it's not being taught. I mean, it's not something that people discuss.
I grew up in Oklahoma and never heard about the Tulsa
Yeah.
episode until I was middle-aged, you know.
That gives me chills. Listen, hearing that's heartbreaking. So heartbreaking.
Elaine was called the Elaine Rape Riot,
Right.
yes, you know, the word massacre never came up until the last decade.
Yeah. And we grow with language. Like, depending on how far back these events happen, it's just like, oh, these people were killed. And then it's like, no, that is a massacre. Oh, no, that is a genocide. Like, all of language changes and grows so we can have more specificity to events that actually are happening.
Regarding censorship, I published a poem about Elaine event in the Arkansas Review, and they were brave enough to publish it, but I got some blowback from some white readers.
I'm so
You
sorry.
know, in the Elaine vicinity, you know. They didn't appreciate my characterization of that event.
But that's the bravery of art, right? I do not expect a single soul to like every poem that I expect conversations. I expect different perspectives. I know that at least one of the pieces that I have read today has affected everybody in this room, at least one of them. And everybody has a different poem that they were affected in a negative way. And I accept that. I understand that that is a part of sharing your art, that is a part of people experiencing your art and taking it in. I don't think there's never going to be a world where you're going to have 100% agreement. I think a lot of it is just like respecting perspectives and being like, I definitely get that, thank you. And that is just art in life.
I see you as a cycle breaker. What would you say to other cycle breakers who want to unpack and address generational trauma, but their family members aren't ready or willing to hear it?
Oh, that's girl.
How much time do we have?
Right. Your truth and your story is exactly that. So if you are waiting for the people who caused you that trauma to say it's okay to say I caused you that trauma, that's never going to happen. And I pick specific poems, but there are definitely a lot of other poems in my book. Like me personally, I had to get over the hump of being able to write about my mother in ways that was just it's just my story. And it's just my truth. And so I have to work on healing myself, and eventually maybe you'll get that apology, maybe you'll get that sit-down talk of acceptance, or maybe you'll inspire the family around you to do the same. But waiting on permission to pull the dirt from under the rug, you're never going to get that, ever. And so my advice would be, take it as you can, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Get a therapist. I wish my therapist would be my friend so bad. But she ignores me in public. And she walks away. She's like, okay, girl, bye. But get a therapist. Like, it is the most helpful tool when you are at a place to talk about these things and open up and heal and break those cycles. And breaking cycles is not a big thing. I think when we think of breaking generational cycles or trauma, we think, oh, it means I'm a millionaire, or it means like I've moved to Hawaii or London and I'm so far away from home. And I think it's simply accepting what happened, choosing not to recycle that behavior, and setting a simple boundary. I'm not coming home this year for Thanksgiving. Why? I don't feel really safe. And I love you all. Send me all the pictures, take all of the videos, but I think I'm gonna stay in Arkansas this year. That's breaking the cycle, because I am not allowing myself to sit in this space and feel uncomfortable, unsafe, or attacked. And so I think about it in these micro, small ways versus this big RuPaul, Tyra Banks transformation. Baby step it.
I think those baby steps are huge, though, because they're little, but.
And they build up, and you feel them, and you're like, oh my God, okay, now I can make this other little step and other little step. It's a process. I am not fully healed. I just want to put that out there. I got a lot of trauma, and I still have a therapist, so this is just like part one. I got a lot of more stuff. Sorry.
Publishing process and having more in you, are you planning to self-publish the second one? Now that you're kind of stamped your identity of this is what I like to write and this is my voice, would going through a publisher for a second version be an option, or are you still staying in the self-publishing lane?
So I've done 2 books self-publishing. I have a second poetry book called Ain't I a Woman? And that book is in connection with my one-person show. And I think I am ready for a publisher, because what I realize in publishing is you can't get certain acknowledgments, awards, and things like that if you self-publish, which is crazy, wild. So because I want to share my art on a larger scale and a bigger platform, I think it's just finding a publisher, like you said, that is willing to take that risk on me and that is willing to be brave enough and allow me to publish in the way I want to.
You want to read
Yes.
Arkansas Arts?
Arkansas Arts. Local creatives gather at a multicultural art event. The Latinx poet performs. The crowd cheers. She sits down. The third generation poet performs. The crowd cheers. She sits down. The LGBTQ poet performs. The crowd cheers. They sit down. The Black poet stands. An announcement is heard over the intercom. She is told they've run out of time. The school bell alarm chases the audience out of their seats. Sirens blare like they're hailing unseen tornadoes, like they're trying to prevent a storm. Like the catastrophic hurricanes her words are sure to develop won't be welcome here. Because when you're Black, even amongst minorities, you are still the minority. When you're Black, some brown and rainbow hands are less likely to save you. When you're Black, even amongst creatives, your expression has a limit. Your stopwatch turns into grandfather clocks. You can only perform on the hour every other hour. There is a glitch in the safe space we've been trying to create. There is still racism within the arts, divide amongst the diverse. The way white artists molds Black sculptures as if to say that they can tell my story better than me. The Black poet holds back the river of tears in her eyes, uses her Maybelline lash as paddles to steer them away from her face. But the stanzas in her throat grow arms and legs, crawls to the edge of her mouth, taps at her teeth, tug at her tongue. Like this be a fight for her ancestors to finish. Like the Maya Angelou that burns in her pen be more than willing, like Nikki Giovanni breathing into her lungs, ready to give it a go. Like the army filled with greatness be more than ready, but instead of giving the command, she swallows it down with an all too familiar submission that only a black girl knows. Because in the end, the black poet never needed your fucking stage. For she was a walking metaphor, dipped in braille, and all who chose to feel her magic would.
I really like that poem. And I got to admit, being a stupid white guy that I am, I had no idea the idea of being a minority among minorities. That concept never would have crossed my Caucasian mind. So, can you speak more to that? Because that's something. Again, it ties in so well with the previous poem, the old social justice poem. But I just wonder if those problems are related, if those issues, concepts are related, and if one was to get fixed, if it could lead to healing the other problem.
So, Arkansas Arts happened to me back in 2021 or 22, one or the other. And I remember I was at the event, and there was a diverse panel of poets. And the lady actually, like, mid-poem, as I'm, like, saying my segment of it, she says, "Oh, my God, I'm so sorry. It's time to go. Bye." And I was like, yeah, cool. I didn't even want to read. I was just here playing. And I remember thinking, because the group of poets were so diverse, that I'd have like a rally of people behind me, like, "Oh no, you're going to give her time. You're going to let her go." And no one said anything. And everybody sat down, and everybody moved on. And I always have this thing where I don't like comfort versus confronting. Don't comfort me after a moment by my car in the parking lot if you're not going to confront what you just saw take place when I was hurt. For me, when I say that being black means that you're a minority within minorities, it is because it's true. We look at black treatment as if it has only been taught to white cultures to look down on black people. Every other race as well. If you take a black person home to an Asian family, what is this? There's a stop. There is, because that family has been taught that the black person is the lesser. And this is all of races. And we've seen this throughout the history of time. You see this when a black person goes and gets their nails done, or goes into any shop that is minority owned that isn't black. We are still treated as if we went to a white establishment, because blackness is a plague. It is treated as if it is a plague, no matter your race. It is treated as if you are above this lower status thing. So I can be in a room with diversity, but if other races, and we are seeing more and more of it now, other races, people my age are coming forward having the conversation of like, no, my family was like, don't bring a black person home, or don't have black friends. They're thugs, they're hoodlums, they're gang members, they're ratchet, all of these negative things. And so it's hard to say that just because I'm around what we are deeming, and labeling as quote unquote diversity, that I'm safe.
Man. Any questions? Oh.
Hey, girl. No, that last poem was incredible, and as a black creative, like, it really, really spoke to me. I say all the time, black people are the only group of people that will get told by other people of color to not make it a race thing. But how would you describe the Arkansas arts now? Has it improved any?
Girl, this was just like 2 years ago.
Okay.
This was the other day. This was the other day. This was the other day. I mean, I think that we are well-intending, and I think conversations are hard, and I think that because specifically Northwest Arkansas is so far ahead of other places in Arkansas that it's very hard for us to accept that we still have room to grow. We still have moments where we're disgusting. And I think the people in a lot of cases that are in power are not open to having these conversations. And it's super hard because, once again, if there's a room of diversity and I'm the only person that's like, this feels weird, then I seem like the problem because all the other minorities are fine. They're safe. I would give an example. Back in 2001, I was working on a project as an activist. I won't say the project, but I will say that, yep, that one. I will, yep. I will say it was restructuring a campus of some sort. And in the design of the restructuring, they had a beautiful spreadsheet of how they were incorporating the Marshallese community and how they wanted to put that in the forefront and make it a part of the design. And I thought, oh my God, it's beautiful. And then 5 slides later, because it took up like 5 slides, and it was this beautiful idea and this beautiful concept, it was the Latinx community, and it had like 3 slides, and it was so gorgeous. And I was like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And I'm the only Black person on this call. And they like moved on. And I remember in this meeting, it was via Zoom, I kind of like unmuted my button. I was like, hey, since we have all this funding and we are basically starting from scratch, we're like making this jazzy, I would love if we could incorporate, and I would be remiss not to mention this because I am the only Black person that's on this call, I would love if we can incorporate like some safe spaces for Black people to feel welcomed in this area, because if we're completely honest, this town was a sundown town. And the population of Black people here has grown. And so I bet that we could have just a little something in the thing, you know, to make the Black people in this area feel just as welcome as the other minority groups that live here. And the response I got was from a white man. He's like, well, I'm from Canada. Should I be upset that I'm not included? And I was like, but you still white. Like, a Black person from Canada is going to have a very different lived experience than you. And I just remember it was myself and it was 3 other women of color on this call. And the moment he said that, all the women of color muted their video, and we all got in this group text message. I don't even know who made the message. We was like, what the, I'm from Canada. What does that even mean? But that's the thought process. And later I got an email, and he apologized. And what I thought was so disheartening was his comment in the apology was, mind you, also this whole meeting, I'm not being heard. The only time I get to speak is when another one of the women of color that were on the call were like, I'm so sorry, Tasha was actually about to say something. And in his email of apology, he said, I'm sorry, but your comment makes us have to go back and restructure everything. And my response was, the bigger issue is that we were never thought about in the process. You thought to cater to every other minority group in this area, and you did not for 1 second, not even just cater, mention, highlight. You had no thought process about the Black people who come here and spend just as much money and who have on just as many events as every other group. we didn't deserve that same attention. So,
Fun fact, Elaine took place in 1919. In 2019, they finally put up a historical marker, not in Elaine, but in Helena. So why does reckoning take a century when everybody's dead and gone?
child. That's a hard, I don't know the answer. Well, because if something happens during my generation, right, so me, us, right now, it probably won't be labeled properly as what it was, right? Because we're doing the labeling. And so then the next generations underneath us that come behind, they're like, actually, this thing was that. We need to label it this. These people deserve that. Because we're living in it, in the moment and in the now, I think that is just my educated guess. I think that's what takes it so long, because the generation that goes through it, they don't want to change. They're not going to accept any type of new thought pattern. It takes the younger generations underneath them to say, hey, I don't think this was the best way to do this.
So it was a riot for 75 years, and when it became a massacre, then suddenly we pay attention.
Suddenly we pay attention. Ish.
Ish.
Did it turn off again? Yo, Giving Tuesday is still.
Give to the library.
Give to the library, please. Thank you. And I can also address the question that you have, sir, after this wonderful event, because I am currently doing research in Phillips County and can address all of these things. I want to bring it back to the poetry, though, specifically with the, I apologize for not remembering the marvelous titles, but the poem regarding the protest and then comparing it with Arkansas arts. And I think I'll also promote this book, too, that I'm reading. One of the best books I've read this year is Insurrection. It's also late. I am so sorry. But she has brought up some beautiful, wonderful things. Like, when those poems came up, it reminded me of a quote that she did was, she stopped going to protests as a Black woman because the only time that she could be seen was in a protest. And to be viewed as a human was at a protest, and that she and her community had to show up in order to fight the thing they shouldn't be fighting to begin with. And, you know, for you to do that labor, when you were already doing labor to begin with by simply being present, and then the actual event where you were to be there as a creative in your full form as a creative, that's robbed from you. And this was such an interesting kind of, where do you, Natasha, get to be seen, but on a larger scale as well? When do Black women get to be seen and heard after doing all this labor? Like, no matter what the labor is. And here's this moment to shine, and how many moments do you get to shine? You know? That's a rhetorical question, but it's so frustrating. And I think it goes to truly the gatekeeping within the arts community itself. You don't have to necessarily be rejected from a grant to not get an opportunity.
Absolutely.
You just have to say the wrong thing to the wrong person that they don't agree with because the funder likes it, doesn't like it, what have you. And you're completely cut. On top of that, the many narratives that I have heard literally in the since 2020 of Black women's ideas being taken, creative ideas being taken by non-Black women. This happens in our community. It happens all the time. And this moment right here, just to hear my friend and to hear my fellow creative publish her own work, sit in this chair in this beautiful building, be streamed online, is kind of a radical moment for you, and I think for this community.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I just have a question. What's your favorite poem?
Ooh. That's hard. My of the book, Oh, that's so hard. Oh, that's a good poem. I mean, that's a good question. And I don't know. I will say, yes, I do. The last poem that I put in the book is, I don't know if it's my favorite poem, but I think it reflects my current state. And that poem is called A Sink Full of Memories. That would be like one of my favorites. And it is about my mother and dealing with Alzheimer's.
We have one poem left. It's not that poem. If you want to read that poem instead, the pressure's on now. We could probably read too. I was worried that we're running long, so
getting the wrap it up sign. I talk a lot. I'm sorry, y'all.
No, this has been fantastic.
So we'll do the last one and get out of y'all's hair and let you guys get back home and eat your foods and things. I think this poem would be my most vulnerable poem, which is why I couldn't give it a title. I had no title for it. And the title is insert title here. Whoops. Okay. Most men only truly love me after they break me. Something about fragments and particles reminds them of sacrifice. When I'm sad, I wear my grandmother's old sweatshirts. It smells like hospital beds, lost memories, and regret. I wonder, do they chase her in the afterlife? The things she forgot to remember? Did she choose death over not knowing? Did the heirlooms meant to pass down float away with the years, or did we just not have enough memories worth holding on to? The day I burst into flames to protect my loved ones, I engulfed everything around me. Eventually, they complained about the heat, how my existence makes them perspire. Why can't she just flicker and not burn like normal people? I fell at things I had every intention at exceeding in. I turn people into art, then make them stand in line to see it. The nerve of me. I'm drawn to my lover's demons. They remind me of myself, the parts that I keep buried. I overcompensate with kindness. The last time I kissed a man, it felt like rubbing open wounds across sandpapers and pouring salt into the remnants. I was told to label this as love. So I took a rustic needle, few strands of thread, sewed my mouth together, and screamed to the top of my lungs. Somehow, it didn't work. No one heard me, so no one knew. One Thursday night, I stayed up until 3 a.m. writing love notes dedicated to my muse and sticking them into a glass jar. Most of them were true. Others were how I wish he felt about me. I realized that this isn't the line of a poem, but simply a sad fact. Most memorable moments in my life are sad facts. I dress them up in metaphors and punchlines so they will have a better meaning. I ramble in my poetry because I am trying to prove a point. Somewhere between reading and performing, I'm sure they'll notice.
I see why you insert title here now.
Yeah.
That was going to be my question. And you said this, you believe this is your most vulnerable poem.
Yes.
And tied back to what you said earlier, I can see that, and I appreciate that because I feel like you said you hope that your vulnerability will encourage other people to be vulnerable. and tell their truths. And so I can see a lot of people reading this and identifying, and I see you reaching a lot of people with that poem. It's great. My favorite line in there is, there's so many good lines, but my favorite line is at the end, I ramble in my poetry because I'm trying to prove a point. So what point would you like to leave the audience with tonight?
First of all, that was a slick segue. That was kind of dope. I think the point that I would like to leave the audience with is vulnerability is so foreign to us in the beginning. It is this thing that we are taught that exposes us to being weak. It is this thing that we are taught that makes us a target. But I would like to say that vulnerability is one of the bravest things you can do. Like being vulnerable, it's so brave and it's so beautiful and it's so unbelievably healing. And I think that it's never too late to start a journey or a process of healing. Whatever that is. I don't know you personally, so I don't know what you need to heal from. But I do know that we all deal with things and we carry them throughout the years. And because we can function, we think we're okay. And I would like to challenge the idea of not just surviving, but thriving in your lives. Like wherever you are, whatever that is. But it starts with understanding where you were hurt, when you felt low, when you felt your most sadness. And it's talking to that little child that is in us, or the teenager, or whatever age that was when we stopped aging. Because so there's the thing, like, you don't age past your trauma. Have you ever heard that? Mm-hmm. And so the ability to go back to that age and that person that once was and hold their hand and talk to them. And also, you're big now, so you can like push anybody down that tries to hurt that younger person. Like you are their like protector now, and you can like walk them through the process of healing because you have all of your knowledge and all of your strength and all of the things. And that would be the biggest point that I would like to leave with the audience.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. This is terrific. I think Leah.
Tonight and participating in the discussion. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Natasha. Do you have books that you brought
I do
to sell?
have books. If
All
anyone
right.
was interested in purchasing a book, I have some.
Meet us at this back table if you're interested in buying a book tonight. And
Thank
thanks
you.
again.
Thanks.